The Hartford Online Radio Network. On the Horn. onthehorn.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Moore. You're listening to News Talk Tonight. Well, tonight we get to cover a few things that are near and dear to my heart. Politics and more politics. Yeah, I know. The election was last week. I get that. But apparently, in certain parts of the state of Connecticut, the election continues. Or so one candidate would like. And we'll be discussing some of the lay of the land, if you will, as far as maybe 2014 and budget stuff. Why? Because it does impact us, whether we like to think about it or not. News Talk Tonight is brought to you by Gateway Financial Partners, Sherbert Technologies, CentralCTDental.com, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, and Casa Diana, as well as Sandus Travel, and, well, you know the rest. Amazon.com. The election that continues is one that is a senatorial race in the Meriden-Middletown Senatorial District. It was a very close race, and that is why the incumbent who lost is looking to get a recount and perhaps try to win back his seat one way or the other. Senator Len Suzio from Meriden has written a letter to the Secretary of State, Denise Merrill, to authorize a recount of votes for his senatorial district. Suzio, the incumbent Republican, has apparently lost his re-election bid to Democrat Dante Bartolomeo by 238 votes. That's 40 votes beyond what the state statutes would require for an automatic recount. Senator Suzio cited the facts that supported his request, among them being the two candidates were listed on 5 different party lines, the fact that the head moderator for the election in Meriden was also Bartolomeo's campaign treasurer, and the fact that the vote was historically close. The unfortunate thing for Senator Suzio is that since the statutes require an automatic recount if it's 0.5% differential, means that he is 40 votes beyond what would be the automatic recount. Senator Suzio was listed on the Republican, the Independent, and the We the People party lines, while Bartolomeo was listed on the Democratic and Working Family lines. Suzio claims that the multiple line appearances could lead to counting errors and that such errors could in fact be high. Unfortunately, Senator Suzio does not necessarily cite any facts that support that particular supposition. Av Harris, the Secretary of State spokesman, indicated that the statutes are clear and that Senator Suzio's margin of loss does not fall within the automatic recount margin and that there will be no recount unless Senator Suzio were to sue in court. Senator Suzio is considering suing in court. Ah, the election that never ends. Also, in 2014, there has been significant speculation that were the governor to run for re-election, he would not win. That was before the election. Apparently now, the numbers aren't so bad. Governor Daniel P. Malloy's popularity numbers have been low for some time now, particularly after the passage of the budget. And they were so low that it was unlikely that he would succeed in being reelected. That was then, this is now. Governor Malloy's numbers seem to be improving based upon results from the public policy polling. Governor Malloy, seemingly one of the most unpopular governors in the United States. Yeah, that's not just, the Northeast. The entire United States woof, appears to be enjoying a boost from the election and or as a result of his response to Superstorm Sandy. According to the poll, quote, "We tended to find him one of the most unpopular governors in the country, but so far he saw a major improvement in our last poll where he led a hypothetical Republican foe 48-37. And that basically is with a hypothetical Republican.
So he went from that guy's awful to ain't so bad.
Not only that, but what would be more interesting would be if the polls were actually to present possible Republican contenders as opposed to a hypothetical elephant. Like, for instance, Tom Foley. Tom Foley, who only lost the gubernatorial election 2 years ago by a sum total of about 5,600 votes. All of them in Bridgeport. Now, we don't have any poll indications one way or the other, but Tom Foley has not been exactly the most verbal of people, even in the election, and has not really stated whether or not he would run for re-election.
Has he even really been out and about? I haven't heard his name mentioned other than you just now in 2 years.
He's been a part of a public policy group.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's kind of like a think tank.
Oh, okay.
And it's...
I love those.
Yes. At least they do tend to make the people who participate in them think. Which is always a good thing. Not something that is always readily apparent in our politics.
No.
Yeah. What Governor Malloy is going to contend with is not just a potential Republican opponent. He will, if he runs for re-election. He's also going to be running into a little bit of an issue with the budget. Now, we know that it's been a $1 billion nut that he had to crack, which he kind of sort of did. But according to numbers that are coming out now, it looks like we're looking at another deficit, and one that is fairly significant. The Office of Policy and Management Secretary Ben Barnes has reported that expected revenue has dipped by $128.1 million. And if the projections reported remain true, the new General Assembly will have a tough row to hoe the next session regarding the budget. The numbers released this last Friday by the Office of Fiscal Analysis and the Office of Policy and Management are comparatively based on the numbers that were adopted by the General Assembly. So in other words, the dip that they're talking about is based on what they expected and what the General Assembly accepted back in June. And there is no indication that there will be an improvement either as far as the economy, or rather as far as the revenues are concerned, particularly because the economy has been stagnant in Connecticut, to say the least. Now, the Republicans are jumping on this because, in their estimation, the revenue dip plus the certain rising costs, particularly in Medicare, are going to generate what is likely going to be, in their opinion, a $200 million deficit. Why is that important? Because there is a law that is in place right now that says that the governor then has to submit a deficit mitigation plan, which would entail either raising taxes, cutting services, or both. The governor has been, in the last several weeks, quite adamant about stating how he is not going to be raising taxes. That means, if we are dealing with a budget mitigation situation, cuts, and fairly drastic cuts. Because if we're at a $200 million deficit, that means we're going to not hire more judges. That means we might shut down yet another DMV office.
Police, stadies,
Yep.
Oh.
And it also means that municipal aid could also be cut. That would have a direct impact on anybody who owns property, because the towns base their income in large part on the property taxes. And if the towns don't get money from the state, that means they hike the property taxes in order to bring their budgets into balance. Ouch. If that happens, watch the governor's popularity, such as it is, descend into the negatives. Just so we're clear, as of November 1st, State Comptroller Kevin Lembo had certified that there was a budget deficit of $60.1 million. That is a far cry from 200. But if the revenue dips more than $140 million, which is possible, then the $200 million deficit is a greater reality, if you will.
Casinos on every corner? State run?
State taxes on marijuana, which will suddenly become legalized.
And readily available.
It's a problem. Now, one of the things that will have a direct impact on the Connecticut economy is what's going to happen with the federal budget. As some of you may have been made aware of in the last week, there is this little thing called the sequestration. What is that, you might ask? Well, it is if we don't come up with a new budget plan by December 31st, 2012, as of January 1st, 2013, there will be two things that will happen automatically. One, we will go back to the Clinton tax rates. Everybody, not just everybody below 250 million, it's everybody. Now that's going to mean, for instance, that those who are in the 250,000 or above tax brackets, plural, will be looking at a tax bite, and emphasis on the word bite, of 30% up to 35%.
Ouch.
Yeah. And those of you who are paying like 22% right now would be dealing with 28% thereabouts. That's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Now, as everybody hopefully knows who's listening, Connecticut proved that it was indeed the bluest of blue states as of this last Tuesday. I will admit that I was kind of on the fence as far as the 5th District was concerned. I did say that I thought that Rohraback had a slight edge.
I believe that was your call last week.
But what really happened in the 5th, and this is something that we can go into in a little bit, was that the votes in the cities came out strong. Danbury, Waterbury, Meriden, New Britain.
I was going to say, I think I might have even mentioned it last week, we saw more people at the polls than I've ever seen. We go very early. We were there like 6:45 or 7 o'clock, something like that, and that was the longest lines I've seen. And granted, it was probably, when we left, there were probably only 50 people in line, but that early in the morning, that's a lot. That's bodies getting out to vote.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That was awesome.
We were looking at, if I recall correctly, about an 80% voter turnout.
That's amazing.
80%
That's
of
amazing.
the registered voters, not necessarily anybody who could vote. You had to be registered. It's 80% of the registered voters. It is phenomenal. It is one of the highest turnouts that we've had in decades. Now, as I was saying, we proved that we were the bluest of blue. One of our congressmen happens to be the 4th in line as far as leadership is concerned in the Democratic Party congressional delegation, if you will. That would be our very own Senator John Larson. Now, the reason why I mentioned the sequestration is that apparently Congressman Larson is fairly optimistic that there will be a grand bargain that will come about, some might say magically, in December, that will continue the Bush tax rates, as well as would head off a number of the deficit reduction cuts that we would be facing, about $1 trillion. And it would be split amongst defense as well as domestic spending, including Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. I believe that the defense budget itself will be cut by 18%.
Wow.
Now, why is that important to Connecticut? Gee, about a large percentage of our employment comes from defense contractors.
Yep.
That would be United Technologies. That would be, Pratt & Whitney Electric Boat. There's currently 2 submarines that are being built right now in London. That might actually come to a screeching halt if the sequestration was allowed to continue.
Build faster, boys.
Pretty much. But make sure those welds are good.
Yeah.
Because you don't want rivets popping when you're a mile below.
No.
It just would not be good.
All the EV green in the world isn't going to keep those things in.
No. Congressman Larson is confident of the grand bargain coming about, in part because of the election results. The Democrats picked up 3 seats in the Senate. So now it is 53 Democrats, 2 independents who are likely to caucus with the Democrats, and 45 Republicans.
So they picked up 1 after I stopped paying attention the next day. I knew the guy from Montana had won.
Yes.
To get to 52. I didn't realize that they'd picked up another one. Which, do you know which one it was after that?
It was one of the western states.
Okay.
Washington was one where we have the first openly lesbian senator-elect, which I think is a wonderful thing. But, gee, wouldn't it be nice if someday that's really not such a big deal?
Yes.
So, and the Republicans lost 10 seats in the Congress. Now, they were up 25.
Right.
They could stand to lose a few. The problem that the Speaker of the House is going to have to contend with, though, is he's still got about 30 Tea Party Republicans that he will have to contend with. And he also knows that the only way that any of them are going to be able to get anything done in the House is if he was to either stay with the Republicans, in which case that could end up with, well, recent polling, as I noted on First Read, it used to be MSNBC, it's now NBC. Some reason Microsoft dropped NBC like a hot potato. That 59% of the population, and this was both exit polling and then follow-up polling the day after, 59% of those who voted indicated that if the sequestration went through, the Republicans would be to blame. 10% said that both parties would be to blame. Those aren't good numbers for the Republicans. And they have to be aware of that for 2014. And notably, it used to be 35 Tea Party Congress people. Now it's 30. That was half of the seats that they lost. So Boehner cannot be blind to that particular line of thinking, if you will. And he's already indicated, sort of, that there is a willingness to deal with revenue enhancement, not taxes. He's talking about closing the loopholes in the tax code.
If we already know what the loopholes are that need to be closed, then why is this so difficult to get done?
Because what the Republicans are talking about, as far as loopholes are concerned, are certain deductions that Americans love, hold dearly, like the interest deduction for your mortgage, like student loan repayment, like a tuition credit, like, medical credits. Those are things that would be potentially on the chopping block as far as the Republicans are concerned.
Okay.
The Democrats are saying, no. They are, and Larson in particular was saying the other day, he was speaking to a church group, to about 50 of his constituents, at the Philip C. E. Church in the north end of Hartford. He gave a 45-minute lecture. And he indicated that while he was being pressed by one of the audience members, and was specifically asked, do you think that Social Security, Medicare, and tax reform should be a part of that grand bargain? Yes, Larson said, as long as entitlement reform is not on the backs of the beneficiaries. Now, you can deal with entitlement reform, read that to mean Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, by cutting out certain extraneous costs, tightening those little loopholes up. You could also deal with revenue enhancement, as the Republicans like to call it.
I like that word.
By virtue of certain credits that are given to businesses, like, say, the petroleum industry, which are still looking at a $240 million surplus. They like to call it profit.
Yes.
That they wouldn't need if you took out $50 million. Now, they would cry, but there goes our research and development. Not when you have $250 million in profits, gentlemen. The fact of the matter is, both parties are going to have to come to the table, and they're going to have to be willing to not gore their sacred cows, but at least cut them a little bit.
Yeah, bleed them.
Nick them, not so it's mortal, but enough so that there's something coming from everybody. Now, one of the other things that I've postulated as if you will, a compromise on the tax stuff is, instead of making $250,000 the benchmark, why don't we make $500,000 the benchmark? You're talking about a discrete number of people who would be impacted.
Mm-hmm.
You would not be having as great an impact on the middle or upper middle class if you were to extend the tax cuts for folks up to $500,000. You would also be likelier to be doing the very thing that the Republicans have been preaching about for the last 2 years. Who are the folks that are generating jobs? Small businesses. How many small business people are showing earnings of $1 million? How many small business people are actually showing income of $500,000? Not a lot. Most of them are going to be in the $100,000 to $500,000 range. So if you want to help small business, make sure that you extend the tax cuts for those people who are really going to actually have an impact on the economy, small businesses.
I like it.
And I think that you will find that there may be some shifting in the backroom deals that are currently going on. Right now, there are back channel conversations happening between the Speaker of the House and the President.
The fact that there's any conversation right now makes me happy, because we haven't seen that for at least 2 years.
Absolutely not.
So,
just say no has been
Yep.
one side.
Yep.
And the other side has been saying, but, and not really presenting anything that we could put on the table. Why? Because then it would be roundly attacked, and that would become fodder for an election. Well, guess what, folks? We don't have to worry about a presidential election for another 2 years.
yeah, exactly. 8 weeks.
and as a result, there should be some ability to shift. The president has indicated a willingness to deal with that. And the Speaker of the House has indicated a willingness to deal with that. A glimmer of hope. Now, why is that kind of sort of important, particularly as far as Representative Larson is concerned? I'll tell you why. There's going to be a news, there's going to be a gathering of reporters outside of Minority Leader Pelosi's office tomorrow morning. She is currently meeting with the caucus right now as we speak. She is also going to be meeting with Democratic leadership, House leadership, tomorrow morning before the news conference. It is speculated that she may be indicating that she is stepping down from her leadership position.
Really?
She's 72.
Yeah. That's young compared to some of the others.
Well, now there you go again. I was 84 and I could still run a country. What?
Wake up.
Is the cabinet meeting over? No, and as a result, you will see if she does step down from the leadership position. She didn't say that she was resigning. She just got reelected. She ain't resigning. But she could very well be kind of tired, especially after the last 2 years. And maybe seeing...
Maybe a fresh face.
Maybe seeing a need for a new leader. Now, there is speculation that Steny Hoyer, who is the House whip, minority whip, might be bucking for that. Guess who else might be? That would be Representative John Larson. Because it took him this long to get up to number 4. At the very least, he could end up moving up a notch or two. I don't think that he has enough votes for a leadership position necessarily, but he does have enough support right now with who's there to be able to bump up 1 or 2, which would be extremely cool, because that would it would help open the spigots a little bit more as far as federal money is concerned for our state. And that is going to play well as far as 2014 is concerned if we weren't dealing with such significant number crunching that we have to cut $200 million from our budget. Just saying. There's a new poll out that says that people want to see super PACs not have so much influence. I know that that's a shock. I realize that some of you are looking at your computers right now going, what? No. It is a broad spectrum. And it is in large part because more than $6 billion were spent nationally on our election this last Tuesday.
And it seemed like a lot of it came from just Linda McMahon and Chris Murphy's campaign alone.
Well,
I don't know what the numbers were that they threw out for
Rohraback.
Full advertising. Yeah, I didn't really see a whole lot of his stuff until the very end.
They were keeping their powder dry.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks we were, we got pounded by him. But most of the stuff I saw was McMahon and Murphy.
Conventional wisdom will tell you that if you don't advertise early, you stand the risk of being labeled by the other. No, not forgotten.
No.
Labeled by the other side. And Estes' campaign was very quick to pick up the cudgel of saying, you elect Rohraback and he will be with the Tea Party. They weren't saying that he was a Tea Partyite. They were saying that he would be voting with the Tea Party. That resonated. And it resonated primarily in the cities, where the Democrats had a huge get out the vote. In fact, according to one analysis, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 towns in the 5th District were overwhelmingly Rohraback. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 towns or cities were overwhelmingly SD.
Hmm.
And there were about 4 towns that were sort of SD,
Split.
between 2 and 5% in favor of. There were more that way in favor of Rohraback. So Rohraback essentially took all of the small towns.
Right.
And SD took a couple of the small towns, surprisingly Salisbury and Kent, which was in Rohraback's backyard.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
But it was the cities that put her over the top.
You know what we could use right now? One of those boards like John King had on CNN where we have like a street level breakdown of everything. This is Linwood Street in New Britain. Half of it voted.
Well, not only that, but it would be interesting to see just how the various districts in a city voted. Because in, for instance, New Britain, it was like 10,000 for SD, 3,000 for Rohraback early on in the night. That ratio did not change.
Wow.
In Waterbury, it was almost 10 to 1.
Wow.
Okay? In Danbury, it was like 5 to 3. And the result was the 10 towns that he took by a very convincing margin did not have enough votes to overcome that. Wow! That's huge. And Susan Bigelow, who writes for ctnewsjunkie.com, was basically saying, hey, wonder if that means that the 5th is never going to be safe for a Republican. The answer to that question is maybe not. It depends a lot on how the Republicans respond to a get out the vote. Now, I can tell you, for instance, in Simsbury, the Republicans outnumber the Democrats by, I believe it was like 5,200 to 4,800.
Okay.
The number of unaffiliated, 5,600.
Wow.
Okay. Rohraback barely won in Simsbury. And part of the reason why he barely won was because of the identification process that SD was able to successfully put out there, that a vote for Rohraback is a vote for Boehner, is a vote for the Tea Party. Okay? And it's true. If Rohraback had been elected, the very first vote that they take is for the speakership. He would be voting with the Tea Party. He would be voting with all the other Republicans. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. What he would do afterwards, that's a different matter. But they took a man who has always been seen as a moderate Republican. He's always been a moderate voice, whether it's been at the state legislature or just out on the election trail. He's pro-choice. He is certainly more pro-women than not. Okay? He is a fiscal conservative, but he is a social liberal or moderate. Okay? He got painted in the cities as Tea Party. And with a resurgent president, with a pretty solid showing as far as Chris Murphy was concerned in the cities, there was no way that SD wasn't going to benefit from that. And it showed. Rohraback actually conceded by 12:30, which is early.
Yeah.
Given the fact that they still had not finished all of the returns from Danbury, they had not finished all of the returns from Waterbury, they had not finished all the returns from Meriden or New Britain. But the trends were very clear that
He didn't have a chance.
it wasn't going to happen. Now, what does that have to do with everybody in Connecticut? Well, certainly it has an impact on the folks in the 5th District. I live in the 5th District. That's why I pay attention.
As do I.
But if Larson does climb the cursus honorum, the ladder of honor, if you will, that's what they used to call it in Roman times, to the point where he's like number 2, everybody, all 5 districts are going to benefit from that. And it will mean, for instance, that Esty will actually get a couple of committee appointments that might actually be worthwhile. And Himes and Courtney and Deloro particularly, will get choice committee appointments. That also means a lot as far as money coming into the state. So here's hoping, John. Even if Leader Pelosi was to say that she was sticking in, it's still gonna you're still gonna potentially see a shakeup with the delegation, the leadership delegation, and Larson is likely going to continue to climb because he brought in a lot of money for the party, both on the state and the national level.
Yeah.
And as much as the new poll shows that they want big money out, money talks. Now, this last little bit, the Democracy Corps and Public Campaign Action Fund polled 1,000 likely voters in 54 competitive congressional districts with Republican incumbents. The poll was conducted on Election Day and the day after. Overwhelmingly, people were saying, we want the super PACs out. Now, is that going to spur activity on Congress's part to deal with election reform? Not until after we get the sequestration situation done.
Right.
And now, you could end up with the lame duck Congress saying, you know what, let the new guys take the ball, and pass a stopgap measure that could extend the December 31st timeline to, say, January 31st. That would only be if they were close to a resolution.
Some kind of settlement.
Right. But you can also count on John Larson being a fairly significant part of those conversations. So you can rest assured, defense contractors, that we're going to do our best to keep you in the money. And that all goes back towards, why is that important to us? Because our economy is going to be relying heavily on what they do or don't do. And if our economy starts going further south, you can count on a deficit in the state budget, which will mean a lot of hurting. A lot of hurting. Not just state troopers. Mm-hmm. You're talking about, like I said before, town money suddenly starting to dry up. Now, Malloy, as a former mayor of Stamford, one of our big cities, has stated time and again that he's going to avoid, if at all possible, cuts to town and cities. Read that to mean, hey guys, it's on the chopping block if we end up with a deficit mitigation plan that is imposed upon us by our legislature. What did you think about the election, Brian?
I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun. We actually have a party at one of our friends' houses. We have a big screen projector. We color the states in as they start getting projected. It's a fun night. We have little food from each of the candidates' home states.
Nice.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
I was focused more on the coverage of it, as now I kind of do this with you every now and again, and I guess I'm actually part of the media.
Yes, you are.
So I kind of focused on the different coverages, and we were kind of bouncing around between channel to channel to channel, and we kind of got bogged down with that whole John King map, in Ohio, and the top is going to be all blue and the bottom is all red. I'm just like, oh, dude, back off. Let's go to something else. That's too much sprocket technology.
Right.
You're down at too low a level. Show us the bigger picture. Show us more. But other than that, I thought it was a fun night.
What I found fascinating,
Mhm.
and we're going to do a quick break after my little notation here. Fox News called the presidential election before some of their analysts were willing to call the election.
Oh, well, yeah. That's definite.
Turd Blossom, otherwise known as Karl Rove, was basically saying, wait, stop. No, you can't do it yet. They did.
There has to be a recount.
No, not happening. All right, we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be back very shortly.
You're on the horn. onthehorn.com.
Budwitz and Meyerjack PC is a large Connecticut-based CPA firm with offices in Cheshire and Farmington, Connecticut. Large enough to handle engagements of enterprises with annual revenues in excess of $100 million, yet small enough to cater to smaller businesses and individual clients who expect personalized attention from partners and staff. Client service is the cornerstone of our practice. Our clients have a fixed fee for their audit and tax work. What this means to the client is we're approachable. Personal communication and client services make for strong relationships. Budwitz and Meyerjack, certified public accountants.
Sandits Travel for business and leisure. We'll take you there. Sandits Travel has been proudly serving Connecticut since 1960. That's over 50 years. And we're ready for another 50 years of superior service. Whether you prefer to come in, call in, or log on, we invite you to explore how efficient, diverse, and fun it is to book through Sandits Travel. Save your money and your time with us. Sandits Travel. We'll take you there.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. Do you have any words of wisdom as far as the election was concerned? Sorry, you've been listening to both Dave Moore and Brian Lee, and I just made Brian look like a deer in the headlights.
I had no headphones on. I had no idea we were coming back that quick. Any words of wisdom? Hey, guys, how about we all get down to the bargaining table and get to the job of governing this country? I don't care which side you're on. It doesn't matter. Just sit down and make this all work. Really, that's all that matters.
One of the things that had been bandied about right around the time that the Affordable Care Act was being debated was, all right, we need to lock everybody into a room and throw away the key until they come up with an agreement.
And don't order food.
Nope.
No food, no drinks, no bathroom. Hammer it out. No matter what it is. And that's honestly, let's do that all the time. Just hammer it out. Get this done.
I think that both on the state level as well as on the national level, the Republicans are having to deal with a review of various positions because it is abundantly clear, the exit polls were very clear, that on 4 out of 5 social issues, they were on the losing end. They were not on the popular side of things. Now, just because it's unpopular, does that mean that you give up certain basic principles? No. But if certain basic principles are not what the country needs, and it's clearly demonstrated, then you need to adjust. The Republicans, easy for me to say, the Republicans need to be able to reach out to the Latino vote. The Latino vote is a natural vote for them. Why would you say? Because most Latinos and Latinas tend to be conservative on the socioeconomic spectrum.
And some of the religious things as well.
Absolutely. And as a result, they are a natural well to dip into.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how do you do that? Well, for one thing, stop blocking immigration reform. If the party was to take a position like one that they had 3.5 years ago before they abandoned it, as far as immigration reform, they could recoup a lot of their losses. And they could do so by appearing to moderate somewhat without giving up some core principles. They could still be anti-abortion.
Mm-hmm.
They could still be, we need to spend less. They could still hew to some of these things that they have been living on for the last 8, 12, 16 years and not give up a voter base. The other thing that they need to do is they need to woo the young. They need to be able to appeal to the younger generation in a way that they have not yet.
Part of the way to do that, my guess is find younger candidates. And in a lot of these places, there is a lot, joking before about how old some of these guys are and women.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the problem. You're not appealing. I don't want grandpa who can't reset his VCR or the timer on his cable box being in control of anything.
You know what
Go younger.
John Decker should do? He should move to the 2nd District. Now, granted, he might be called out as a carpetbagger, but he would have a better chance of knocking off Joe Courtney than anyone would against John Larson.
Larson's tough.
Okay. DeLauro is extremely tough in the 3rd District.
Oh, God, yeah.
Pretty much she can write it in as
Did you
long
see
as
a
she
single
wants.
commercial for her through any
Not
of this?
one.
I didn't hear a radio spot for her. I heard one radio spot for John Larson the day before the election. I also only heard one radio spot for two for John Decker within that same time frame. It was the day before the election.
There were several ads that were aired in the last 2 weeks for Joe Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he had Electric Boat wrapped around him like a beautiful cloak.
Oh, God, yeah.
And he had absolutely no problem. In fact, the polls closed at 8 o'clock. The victory party was already done by 9:30. They were coming to Hartford to go to Chris Murphy's. Okay,
that's funny.
I was listening to TIC on my way out of here to go to Hartford, and it was the two hosts, who shall remain nameless, were talking to a reporter at the Courtney headquarters, and the reporter said, "You know what? There's only a few people who are crowded around the TV so that they can watch the other results." Courtney had already made his acceptance speech and had moved on.
Wow.
And the only other vulnerable district potentially is the 5th, not the 4th. Himes has now been reelected 3 times.
3 times.
It's going to be really hard to knock him off. So the only vulnerable seat, quote unquote, is going to be Estee and possibly Courtney if you had a young person running, because Joe's getting up there.
Right.
That's why I would suggest Decker consider either moving to the 5th or moving to the 2nd, because ain't nobody going to be taking anybody out in the 1st. And the other thing is, too, and this is something that the Republicans lost a couple of seats on the state level, which means that they're not appealing to a large group of people. And it's abundantly clear that in order for a Republican to win in the state, you have to appeal to the unaffiliated.
Right.
That means even if you are outnumbering your Democratic opponents voter registration wise, you still have to make sure that you're appealing to the unaffiliated, because you can't count on all of your Republican registered voters voting.
Most of my friends are independents. Most of my friends.
In Simsbury, there was an open seat. The Republicans thought that there was a decent chance that they would pick up a seat there. It had been wrested from the Republican control 3 terms ago by Linda Schofield. She was retiring. The Democratic nominee is now the representative-elect because he won by over 800 votes. Now, again, Simsbury, 4,800 Dems, 5,200 Republicans. For John Hampton to win by 800 votes, he had to have been appealing to the unaffiliated votes. There's no ifs, no ands, no buts.
No doubt.
So, hey, Republican Party, whether you're Simsbury, whether you're the state, whether you were on the federal level, you need to appeal to the unaffiliated, the independent voters. And they're not liking the tune. So either there have been some commentators who have said that they need to really focus on their conservative values. Nuh-uh. That is the road to extinction.
Yep.
You need to come closer to the center. Those are my words of wisdom, such as they may be, with all two viewers. You've been listening to News Talk Tonight. I'm Dave Moore. I've been joined by Brian Lee. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We have been brought to you by Amazon.com, Gateway Financial Partners, CentralCTDental.com, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, Casa de Llana, Sandits Travel, and, Bud Woodson Meyerjack. I'll be back next week. I will be joined, I believe, by co-host Jen Just, who is currently out in the Cape. I hate you.
Is she healthy?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Back is better.
Good.
But was taking a well-deserved vacation.
Why? What was she doing? Just getting people elected?
Yeah, and fundraising, that kind of thing.
Crap.
We'll be back next week, and you know what? We won't talk about elections anymore. I swear.
onthehorn.com. onthehorn.com.